Are you a fan of old school platforming games? Do you like a game with RPG elements? Check out my review of RiftKeeper coming up next on Mumbles. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Mumbles. In today's episode of Mumbles, we're reviewing a new game called RiftKeeper. But before I get into anything about that, I have to ask you guys all a huge favor. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, ring that little notification bell, and drop a like on the video if you enjoy the content. Know how much I appreciate it because it helps the channel grow, it helps us get bigger, better reviews, you know the drill. Just thank you guys all so much. Now let's talk about this game, RiftKeeper. RiftKeeper is a game that is available for Steam, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. Now, RiftKeeper has a description that reads, RiftKeeper is a roguelike platforming featuring RPG elements with fast-paced combat. You play as the RiftKeeper, protector of the rifts that acts as a gateway to the other realms. After the Red Priest summons you to the town, you learn that the rift keys have been stolen. You must uncover the ill intention behind this, find the keys, and whoever stolen them before it's too late. It features over 120 weapons and items. Upgrade your equipment through the game, loot, trade, and buy gear. 30 handcrafted dungeons, dynamic difficulty system, fast-paced action gameplay, 3 powerful bosses, synthetic electronic OST album. In my own words, guys, if you've ever played a Castlevania type game, you can kind of expect that kind of experience. It's got that whole, I'm running through a dungeon, I'm doing things, but it also has some elements of RPG and also some elements of die, rinse, and repeat until you get things right. So guys, that is what this game is. Now I'm going to tell you guys about the graphics, the soundtrack, and the controls. First off, the graphics in this game. This game has okay graphics, but at times it can be really hard to distinguish between platforms you're supposed to jump on and the background itself. I know that this wasn't intentional, but unfortunately, because they made the platforms look so much like the background, sometimes it's hard to distinguish the two apart. So guys, graphics, I'm a little leery on. I'm not a huge fan of them, but they are okay looking. Soundtrack-wise, I personally don't care for the soundtrack. I understand they were trying to go for an electronic synthwave album, but here's the thing, guys. It feels kind of like it was an afterthought, and a lot of the time, music can almost be annoying. I was sitting there, and the same thing kept playing on repeat through one of the dungeons, and I was just like, oh, go away! So, soundtrack-wise, not the greatest thing I've ever heard in the world. Control-wise, this game has okay controls, but they're very simplistic. Almost too simplistic for a game like this. I feel like there maybe should have been some combo moves or other types of moves, something, rather than just button mashing one or two buttons, because that gets a little bit old in these kind of games. So, controls, also not the greatest. Now let's talk about the gameplay. This game tries to be one of those retro 2D games that we all grew up loving, such as Castlevania. Basically, each level plays out the same. Run around, kill monsters, don't die. If you die, you spawn back in town and have to start the whole process over. In order to get out of each dungeon, you must kill 75% of each enemies in the dungeon. If you do not, then you cannot leave that dungeon. Now, at the conclusion of each dungeon, you're asked, do you want to keep going or do you need to go back to town, start the whole process over, and get better gear and stuff like that? The choice is yours. But know this, guys, regardless of your choice, if you die, you have to start the process all over. So, sometimes it's better to cut your losses, take that hard-earned gold, take it back to town and get a new weapon, rather than going through the part of a dungeon you cannot kill anyone in, and ending up dying, having to repeat the process, and losing part of your gold in the process. So it's very much a management game in that regard. So now, guys, the other thing I want to touch on real quick is the combat system, because it's really important to a game like this. In the combat system, you have all different kinds of weapons, shields, swords, but you start with a whip. Until you buy a weapon, all you have is a whip. So with this whip, you have one thing you can do. And that one thing is hit the square button. Square. Small whip, big whip, bigger whip. That's your moves. You don't have any block. You do have a dodge, but that's your moves. Until you're able to buy a shield, you cannot block in this game. Now, obviously this changes as you go through and get better and new weapons, blah, blah, blah. But guys, it's a little disappointing that with standard weapons, you have to have a shield to block, and you can't block unless you have that. The only thing you can do is dodge. So, for a game that prides itself on having really good combat, I didn't feel it. So guys, that is all that there is to tell about in the gameplay section. Now I'm going to tell you guys the cons of this game. The first con that I have is that this game is very repetitive. Again, it is a rinse and repeat game. Go through a dungeon. Up, didn't kill 75%. Up, you tried to and you died. Start over. Up, start over. Up, start over. And each time, the layout in the dungeon is different. So it changes each time. You don't know where enemies are going to come from. And that can cause you to have to run around a bit. And it just makes for a very weird feeling in a game. My second con is that the background and platforms are hard to see. I mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. In a game like this where you have to be able to block and dodge and all that stuff, having something that you can see is very important, and they kind of failed in that regard. I'm also going to list my third con as the actual soundtrack. Not the greatest soundtrack in the world, I just don't care for it. And my fourth and final con is that other games have done this better. We've seen a lot of different games come out recently that have done better than this game. And this game didn't take anything from those games and try to make something new or build on it. Just kind of put out a subpar experience, in my opinion. And it doesn't bode well for the overall score that you're about to hear for this game. So now, guys, let's talk about the overall score for this game. Guys, RiftKeeper, I had high hopes for this game because I do like these dungeon crawler, RPG-ish type games where you have to basically cut your losses, use die, rinse, and repeat. Those kind of things really make me happy. I like having a challenge. But guys, I also like having good controls and something that I know that is fair. And this game doesn't feel fair. Having to go through each dungeon, dodge and roll, when I should be able to parry and block, it just doesn't feel right. I can't stress enough also the background and the soundtrack. They feel incomplete, guys. And it's for that reason I have to be honest with my score today and give RiftKeeper a 4 out of 10 on our Mumbles review. Guys, this is just one of those games that it's just not very good. I'm sorry, it's not. There's a lot of better games out there that I feel that have done this kind of game better. So anyways, guys, this has been my review of RiftKeeper. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Please smack that subscribe button, smack the like button, smack all those buttons. And I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.